Good morning or good afternoon, everyone, depending on from where you are dialing in. Welcome to our webinar today focused on profitability management, specifically focusing on how Leggett & Platt and MarketSphere partnered to implement Oracle's Hyperion Profitability and Cost Management, known as HPCM. My name is Mark Sims. I am the partner in charge of our enterprise performance management practice here at MarketSphere. For those of you not familiar with MarketSphere, we're an Oracle Platinum partner, proven across the entire Oracle platform, including the EPM Enterprise Performance Management Platform, their business intelligence, and their ERP suite of applications. I am happy to have today presenting for us Dr. Randall Wood from Leggett & Platt, Cynthia Molman from MarketSphere, as well as we have Carrie Southern listening in from Leggett & Platt. She may field a few questions at the end of today's presentation. So by way of specific introductions, Dr. Randall Wood is a staff vice president at Leggett & Platt. His team is the Leggett & Platt Business System Office, which provides leadership and project management for corporate initiatives and internal business and manufacturing consulting services, and is charged with all of the business systems at Leggett & Platt. Their major initiatives include S&OP, management reporting, customer and product profitability, inventory optimization, as well as supply chain management. Randall brings over 30 years of diverse experience in engineering, manufacturing, as well as business management, and he leads the business transformation through strategic application of holistic process improvement for the organization. Carrie Southern is a manager in the Leggett & Platt Business System Office. She will be listening in today, and she is leading the Customer and Product Profitability Project. She is an MBA and joined Leggett & Platt in 1998. During her 13 years there, she has worked in various roles in the operations, including cost accounting, assistant branch controller, divisional controller, and sales and operations business planning as well. While she worked on the sales and operations team, Carrie was the lead for the financial reconciliation step in the process, as well as active in the deployment of the new process. Carrie's manufacturing and accounting and finance experience, along with her MBA and project management skills, are important to the project change management and onboarding of operations partners as we went through the project. And last but not least, Cynthia Molman is a director here at MarketSphere. Cynthia has over 25 years of experience in various accounting and finance roles, including 7 years as an accounting instructor, as well as 6 years as a management consultant. Her areas of specialty include profitability analysis, cost management, financial planning and analysis, and project management. She places an emphasis on alignment of cost structures with corporate strategy and performance management. She has a deep activity-based costing and management background, which her experience allows her to implement a various number of softwares across driving scorecards, reporting, and profitability and management. So with that, I will turn it over to Randall to go through the case study from a Leggett & Platt perspective.
Thanks, Mark. A little bit about my journey to this path. I've been with Leggett & Platt for 8 years, and been leading the Leggett Business System Office for about 4.5 years. Before that, I was a Group Vice President of Operations. I began my career as a product development engineer, and then along the way was charged with a lean manufacturing effort, and that led me into operations. I've done transformation turnarounds at 8 different manufacturing operations, and then worked as a lean consulting. And one of the things that we did that was innovating was start applying lean manufacturing methods to administrative and business processes. So that type of work's continued at Leggett & Platt, and I think if you describe what I do, it's really leadership in developing an operational strategy to improve business performance, and then we couple and use enabling technology to really drive successful change management. So if you roll forward, Cynthia. Leggett & Platt is we began over 125 years ago by inventing the bed spring. Mr. Leggett had an idea, and Mr. Platt was a successful manufacturer in the area, and they collaborated on how to produce the first bed spring. Go ahead. And from that, we've grown to be industry leaders in pretty much all the products associated with sleep products, home furniture, office seating, retail fixturing, automotive seating, and that growth has come out of the amazing things we could do with wire, led us to be vertically integrated through our supply chain all the way back where we start with scrap steel, cast billets, roll that into rod, transfer that into high quality wire for our spring manufacturing. And that growth's also been horizontally as we learned amazing things we could do with that wire. We went horizontally into adjacent businesses, that we could apply those products. And then that growth and acquisitions also led us to where we followed many of our great customers globally and internationally, setting up operations around the world. So today, 18,000 employees, we have 20 business units and 130 manufacturing plants in 18 countries. Last year we ended up at just a little over $3.6 billion in revenue. And as we've gone through some strategic changes, we've really focused on cash generation and operations. We've generated over $2 billion in cash the last 4 years, and that's an important part of our strategy. And we're quite proud of our record of over 41 years. We've annually increased dividends, and there's only a few companies that that belong to that dividends aristocrats group. So we're proud of that fact, and that's a mainstay for us. Go ahead. With this background, about 2000 was a watershed event for Leggett & Platt, and I don't think it's a coincidence that it coincided with China joining the World Trade Organization. What we found is we'd grown to a size, and we were growing at 15% a year. About that time, we noticed that our rate of growth started to slow, and the quality of that growth began to deteriorate. Our earnings were somewhat diluted. It caused us to step back and reevaluate where Leggett was at, what we needed to become. So we made some course adjustment to our strategy. It wasn't really a new strategy, but we adjusted and tuned what we were doing. Go to the next slide, please. So out of that, we started to focus on total shareholder return. And instead of growing at 15% a year, we opted that we wanted to be in the top third of the S&P 500. And our metric was the total shareholder return. Instead of just focusing on growth, there was 5 key things that we said would contribute to driving total shareholder return. Improvements to revenue, improvements to our margins. As we have success, we expect to be able the street will reward that and improve our multiple. Continue to increase the dividend, return cash back to our investors, and then reduce the number of shares outstanding. And this plan's being driven to give us about 12 to 15% return on that. So we're pretty well down the path of implementing that. We started that journey in early 2007. And some of the things that we're driving are the strategic initiatives that we're involved in. So we're pretty excited about that. And I've highlighted in pink there the margin change, because that's where our customer and product profitability initiative is targeted. HPCM and the business processes that we associate with that are going to be a key driver to providing our tools, or providing our business partners with the tools and the process to go achieve that goal. Next slide. So one of the things we encountered is that we had a pretty strong emphasis on standard costing, and obviously there's quite a bit of limitations with standard costing. First and foremost, is it's somewhat of a static, dead number. It doesn't react and respond to what's going on in the business. In some of our businesses, we were doing cost-plus pricing. We believed we were doing market-based pricing, but in a B2B business situation, that tends to be a little bit elusive. And as we developed better skills and tools on this, one of the things we recognize is that the change in our business strategy from being market share growth driven to profitable growth was going to cause us to make different decisions. As we've grown and acquired businesses and penetrated market share, that was really the key driver. Go grab the revenue and we'll make it up in volume. And today we've got to be more judicious, more selective, and really appreciate with that scope and diversity that we've got in our products and our customers, we've got to be able to look at what value are we bringing to the table and what benefits do we provide to our customers, what's the cost of providing that service, and is it worth the value they receive from it. So these are some of the backdrop issues that our change management approach on this initiative have to be able to address. Next slide. In the environment we're all dealing with today it's a global economy, and that gets said a lot, it's repeated, but it's the reality. And what we see is it's not just logistically connecting all these global markets and moving, products through the supply chain, but it's being able to deal with each region of the world's got different needs, different demands, expectations for proprietary products, different service level. The competition reacts differently. The governing bodies are different. So, and couple that up with the fact that one of the messages we send to our partners is that volatility is here to stay with us. Our commodities that we buy, the demand that we serve is going to be increasingly volatile. And we've got to be able to react and adapt and respond to that more agilely than we could in the past. So we've got to become more successful at that. And then it's the same thing. We're all familiar with the fact that the speed of information. So in order to deal with that volatility and be agile, we've got to be able to process information in a much more timely manner. And I think that's going to go to creating competitive advantage for us. So why do we do this? In this slide that we're showing here is it really tends to reflect on the fact that as a global business, our customers all have different expectations and unique needs. They each have a different value proposition. There's an expectation that I want what I want, I know what I'm going to pay for it, and I can quickly go look at not just a few suppliers today, but suppliers from around the globe and evaluate information to decide who's best to meet those needs. So to continue to be a global leader in our markets, we've got to be able to provide and meet those needs and services economically. And what we find is with this diversity, it's sometimes a real challenge to be a low-cost supplier. Some customers are going to be purely value-driven. They want the bare-bones price, no frills, and other customers want a full-service model. So what we see with the profitability initiative is really to understand, first of all, what do those different service models cost to provide and deliver, and then be able to put a price tag on that and then gauge, is that cost worth the value and the benefit for the customer? And that, in the end of the day, will make sure that we're giving them what they want at a price that they can afford and then at a cost that becomes a win-win situation. Next page. At the same time, we've got just as much complexity in our product families. So Leggett & Platt was recognized by the Wall Street Journal a few years back as one of the top 50 companies for innovation. And again, with the different industries, the different markets we're in, we've got an immense selection of products and products that are all various stages of life cycle. Managing that becomes a real challenge, and we want to get better at the commercial decisions and the management of the cost, so we understand, when should we sunset these products? What's going to be the economic value of the products that replace that? Are we getting the bang for the buck from the new product development teams? And how do we do the trade-offs between manufacturing absorption and overhead, and coupling that up with where do we globally source this product at? So, what we found is that with our costing methods, that a lot of times the high volume products using standard costing methods are basically subsidizing higher cost to develop lower volume products. And we want to provide our partners with a better understanding of that so they can appreciate that greater. The other thing that I think that our product development team struggle with is the costing methods don't really let them see the forest for the trees. Standard costing lets you, it's an incremental cost to introduce a new part number. So you don't really have a good way to value as the number of SKUs you provide proliferate. What's the cost of the system? How much overhead do we add? How much more complexity do we have to manage through, and what's the cost of that? So that's one of the things we want to be able to answer through our profitability initiative, and really get to the point where we can make good decisions. Is the business really a value business where we need to streamline that complexity, lower our cost structure to be competitive, or is it a full service model that warrants the breadth of selection and the complexity that comes with it? And I think one of the things that this project will be an initiative for is lead us to where we've got a more strategic, marketing-driven product portfolio management effort. So, this is a beginning step for us that'll spawn additional opportunities. Next slide. But more immediate is, from the big picture, well, what are we really going to do with this? So, as I talked about, what we expect to be able to do short term is to quantify the cost of delivering these special services to the customer and really test the value of those services, improve our product portfolio management, and make good decisions about where do we need to simplify, when do we sunset product families. We're already learning as we go through this journey where we can identify cost reduction opportunities that are surprising people. And then how is this going to help us set effective pricing policy performance? And to me, that doesn't mean just setting a better price that reflects the value of what we do, but it's also with how quick can we react. So in this volatile commodity market, when costs move up, we've got to respond to that. And the best time to be able to do that is when steel costs went up and it's on the front page of the Wall Street Journal and people are expecting that. They're sensitized to that. We've got to be able to react and respond, so that inertia doesn't set up to prevent us from reacting to that. I really think this is going to be a catalyst that's going to drive change and performance improvements across the company. One of the things we talk about is a real tactical example of this is I use the example of really create for the customer a FedEx choice. We can choose to mail a letter through the post office for 50 cents, or every day people go out and go to FedEx and spend $8, $10, $12 to make sure that it gets there tomorrow. And we're willing to make that choice because it's a choice the customer gets to make. And that's one of the things that we want to structure our company to is, here's the no-frills, cheapest way to do it and the service level that entitles. But here's the full service model where you can get exactly what you want, but you can make the choice on what the value of that is. some of the other things we're doing as we go through this to help us make those decisions, being a manufacturing organization, we're distinguishing between pure unit cost in the manufacturing level. There's a cost where if I make one, it's $1, 10, it's $10, 100, it's $100. From those batch costs that are lot size dependent. I've got to set a machine up, get materials to it, process that order one time. It doesn't matter how many I make, there's a set cost for making that transition. That's going to be key to how do we go through and evaluate SKU proliferation. By taking our overheads, instead of spreading it on a convenient way according to GAP policies to direct labor, but really looking at what are the activities that drive that resource and that cost expense, and associating those activities with transactions that tell us how much of that activity do we do, and to be able to relate those activities to the customers and the product families that drove that resource consumption, so we can make better costing, better pricing decisions. We're already seeing things where, as we get in and understand these processes, we've seen opportunities where we can reduce costs for things such as order processing. We're starting to get discussions around, well, how do we improve those operations so we've got a lower cost to serve option available to us. And when it comes to the pricing policy performance is, how quickly can we push a price change at, and then how effective are we at getting that price to stick, and communicate it, present the value for why that price has got to change. Next slide. The last thing then, and this comes back to how we apply the lean manufacturing, is in order to manage the deployment cost and keep the implementation cost of a new technology, a new process like this, is we go through and create a standard implementation process with a standard work, a cycle time, and a repeatable delivery process. So this is kind of our model that can quickly let us engage the business, present the value, design the solution for their application, get to what's really important, come back and develop the model, harvest the data, validate it, and then start putting it into play and training the people to use it, developing effective profitability strategies, and then start tracking our execution against those strategies. So what we found with other initiatives like sales and operations planning, we really have developed some very good best practices that let us do this. It lowers the commitment level from our partners. It reduces the pain of putting in a new process, and it gets us to the cash faster. So we're very excited about being able to do this, because with 20 business units, we want to get our process out to them as quickly as possible and start moving the needle on our profitability. So that's a little bit of the background and the Leggett story. I'm going to turn it over to Cynthia to talk about HPCM, and then if there's any questions at the end, we'll be happy to discuss that with you. Thank you.
All right. Thank you, Randall. Yes, so we came in, Leggett had already, set the course for this project on creating customer and product profitability with a level of detail in those models that would allow them to do the things that Randall's just described. So they were already on that course when MarketSphere came in to help them, and we had all selected the Hyperion Profitability and Cost Management tool. A little bit of background about what this tool is. Many companies are already doing some form of cost allocations to enable them to get to a product cost, customer channel cost, customer cost, some way of coming up with some segmentation in their business. And a while back, Oracle realized that a lot of people were doing this in Essbase or maybe they were doing it in spreadsheets and Access databases. So they set about creating a tool that would allow users to develop models more independently from those, basic systems, and something that would integrate with the other Hyperion and Oracle products. So that's the beginnings of HPCM. It is part of the EPM suite, and so this is another advantage where it allows you to link up with planning, if you've got Hyperion planning, if you've got other reporting tools that are Oracle-based, and to give you one portal to get to all of that information. As far as the business performance, the purpose of coming up with these cost and revenue models is because we're trying to create information that doesn't already exist. General ledger systems are built, to provide financial statements for external reporting. Fundamentally, that is their purpose. But we all know that inside the company we have many, many other needs for that financial information in different slices and dices of the business. So that's kind of underneath many, many of these kind of projects. We're looking for information that doesn't exist already. We also have a need within the businesses to create actionable information. Financial statements are historical in nature. They tell me what happened, what I did last month or last year or last quarter, but they're not real good at providing me information that's going to help me make business decisions unless I'm doing some kind of run rates or something where I'm assuming my future looks like my past. So building models that help me drive and understand business performance and how I'm really spending my money, and fundamentally what's underneath it, what is driving that cost, what is driving that revenue to my various lines, is going to give me a lot more information and lets me have something that I can then act on. I can't change what I can't see. This is common. We all know, same along the mantra of, you're going to reward people based on what they're measured, and what they're measured is what they're going to do. So if you can't see what's driving your business, if I can't see what the real profitability of my product lines are, then I'm not really going to be able to act on those in a holistic manner. And then lastly, we're going to talk in a couple of these slides about the visibility and the flexibility of this tool. Businesses are constantly changing, and you have to step back and say, well, how well are the systems that I have in place to keep up with those changes? Randall talked about the various, outside forces that have changed the world at Leggett. The globalization, the impact of China, as a trading partner, and the changes that consumers are having in their own personal decisions. So if I need to have the systems within my company, and this is something Leggett recognized, we need to be able to react to those changes quickly and easily. So I need a system that not only lets me know where I am today, but something that I can use to really evaluate and make better decisions off of. Just to talk a little bit about HPCM itself, for those of you that may not be familiar with the tool. When Oracle set about building this tool, they recognized that while a lot of people were doing this kind of work, it was quite a chorus between finance and IT. These type of systems where I'm doing where modeling require enormous amounts of data. So I need to have access to a data warehouse or other resources for data. I need to be able to load that data and then, apply my methodology to it. So, I might be building some of the models in Excel, but I'm highly dependent on IT to load data to a cube or to provide me files so that I can get that driver information. So when Oracle set about this, they said, well, we'd like to get more of this just into the hands of the finance team. Again, trying to provide that flexibility so that as a business user, I can not only build this model, I can maintain it, I can run it on a monthly basis or whatever my time period is, with less reliance on a data warehouse or the IT functions to provide me flat files or ODI loads or any of those kinds of things. The ability to measure and manage my costs and revenue are dependent upon my model. So the sophistication of the model is, again, a business decision. The tool was designed to allow you to build something that's very simple, and I can have a 1 or 2 step model with some high-level drivers, but it also was built to allow some very complex modeling capabilities where I can, I can send costs, what we call an intra-stage. So if I've got a step to a step, I can loop costs around. I can build in cost structures where I know I've got some direct costs, and so I can send them directly to products. They don't need to go through an allocation process. So again, it was designed to accommodate most any method of allocation that's out there, whether it's time-driven activity-based costing, pure activity-based costing, basic allocations, driver methods of allocations, standard costing. It has the capability of using standard costs and letting you know where you end up with over or under allocated costs because of that. I can run the models monthly, quarterly, yearly, whatever time period I choose. So again, trying to build in that flexibility to allow the user to develop a model that meets their business needs. HPCM sits on top of Essbase, so we're all familiar with the capabilities of cubes these days. So that gives me the ability to do multidimensional costing or revenue allocations. So I can not only look at my results by the various dimensions that I've built in there. For the Leggett model, we ended up with costs by product and customer. So as my end result, I can look at a particular customer and the profitability of the products that customer purchased, or vice versa. I can look at a particular product or a line of products and say who's buying these and what's the profitability of those customers that are buying this product line. So that goes back to some of the decision-making capabilities that Randall was alluding to that they decided they needed to have so that they can determine, are we in the right product lines? What should we be charging for these? Who's buying this? And are those the kinds of customers that we want to be serving with this product? Another capability that's built in here is scenarios or what-if type analysis. I can build my model to reflect my current operations. Then I can create a scenario that would allow me to make changes to that and do a little bit of what-ifing. So I can go in and say, well, what if the driver of this particular product really isn't units, it's batches? And I can go, make that change and say, well, how does that reflect in the costs that I end up with in that product? I also could say, well, what if I combine, a couple of departments together and I have my salespeople actually transact the order processing as well. And so if I have those as separate functions today, I can create a copy of my model, make the changes as appropriate, combine those activities together, and see what does that do to the end cost. So a very flexible tool. This slide is designed to kind of make various customers think a bit. So where are you today? What are the major issues that you have going on in your business? And in talking with a lot of various customers out there, we realize there's kind of three big areas that we see that drive this kind of a system to be adopted. I either have information gaps in my business. I just plain can't get the information that I know I need. And that's because I've got, various people across the company that have their own spreadsheet models. I can't develop the kind of allocations I really know that I need within my business because I just don't have a tool that I can easily maintain and run on an as-needed basis. And maybe I just don't have the capabilities right now to provide multidimensional profitability. So I can only look at products or I can only look at customers, and I haven't been able to cross those in my information yet today. So, the dilemma there, we talk about the black box calculations. For those of you that may be doing profitability in an S-base cube environment or some other cube environment today, while you've been able to control how the allocations occur, and it's probably very accurate in its result, it's kind of a black box because costs go in and then the costs by product and customer come out the back end, but people aren't able to see the stair steps along the way that got you there. So all of the different drivers that I used and all the different permutations and calculations that occurred between those starting point dollars and the ending point product cost are just not easily visible. So one of the features of HPCM is this visibility and the ability to do a walk forwards or backwards and trace costs as they go through the model and see every step of the way what the allocation was that occurred, what the driver was that was used, how many dollars flowed from one step to another, or from a resource to an activity, or an activity to a product if you're using activity-based costing concepts. So that was another need we see out there, and another solution that HPCM can provide. One of the other areas that we see a lot of is that there's everybody's kind of doing their own thing. Randall mentioned they have 20 business units, and while they don't seem to have this problem as much today, many other companies will be out there and say, well, this business unit's got its own spreadsheet and its own model, and another business unit has a different set of spreadsheets and different way of looking at the business, and we need an enterprise view. We need to be able to look holistically across the company at like items. So we can't have everybody doing their own thing. The models that you can establish in HPCM have twofold. I can create one basic model that we put all of the different business units into, so I've created some forced consistency. It also has the flexibility, though, if I've got several business units that might be similar and several others that are distinct but they are similar, I could build two different models that reflect those parts of the business and then join them together from an enterprise reporting point of view. So again, just emphasizing we can have different perspectives, but we can create and link those back together so that you can do the holistic reporting. The last need that we see out there a lot, and that HPCM can help solve, is this need for agility. I mentioned before, we recognize the business is changing. Randall talked about the forces that have caused them to make very major decisions in how they go about their business and actually change the strategy that they were after. How do you keep up with that? How do you have systems today that will let you make those modifications and start churning out the new information quickly so that the business has what they need today, not what we looked like last year, or, yeah, we'd love to update those, product costing models for you, but, it takes 3 people and 2 months to be able to go back and relink all the spreadsheets and get everything updated and changed so that we can, run that again. With a tool like HPCM, you have that flexibility at your fingertips and can make those changes and move forward. There's also some bullets on here, and I want to emphasize again the importance of it being finance-owned and maintained. I'm going to be the first to tell you that, it doesn't mean that I don't need an IT department and I don't need some IT resources helping me, but I'm no longer completely dependent on them. And the reason that becomes important in many businesses is just the resource constraints that exist. IT departments are notoriously overloaded, and to try to get more information or to get them to rewrite some calc scripts for my S-based model, I have to kind of get in line, get in the queue so that I can make that change. The HPCM models allow that business person, that business modeler, to update their models, make those changes, and continue moving on, and not have to worry so much about where the resources are going to come from to get that accomplished. Just to talk briefly about what a typical HPCM implementation project would look like. It's a typical type of project where you see the categories here: requirements, design, data sourcing, build, test, reporting. Very typical in that nature. What is a little bit unique about an HPCM project is that we do spend a lot more time on that model design. How are we really going to have the costs flow through the model that we're going to build? What are the steps along the way? And you can see here I have a small example of a data flow that we designed with Leggett that said, okay, I'm starting off with my general ledger, cost center, department, account, dollars, and how am I going to take those dollars and allocate them through the model? Am I combining costs together at some point? Am I splitting them apart? What is the driver I'm going to use at each step along the way? And how am I defining that new cost bucket? So a considerable amount of time is spent on this design feature. Once the design is on paper, then it's very easy to translate that back into the HPCM tool and reflect that in the actual scripts. I can allocate both revenues and costs within this one model. There are separate layers within the system, so I can keep them separated, but I can assign revenues and costs using the same drivers if I choose, or separate drivers. I can share items between revenues and expenses if I choose. Data sourcing, again, that's a large part of any of these kind of models, so we'll be working hand in hand with where are you getting your data sources. And then, of course, building and testing, the assignments along the way of the cost. From a reporting perspective, this is, an Oracle product, so I have all of the Oracle suites of reporting tools available to me, which again makes it easy if your end users are already used to looking at financial reports from other systems or OBIEE reports within their company. Just a few places where we have seen this being used today. Some of you may be in one of these categories. Some of the projects that have been implemented where HPCM was used, we had a large regional bank that wanted to do customer and branch profitability, and their real need was to allocate their shared services to those to the branches, and then the branches to the customers and products. So we built models that was a shared service allocation model that sent those shared costs to the market-facing or customer-facing business units, and then from there to the products that they supported. We've seen this used in healthcare where they were concerned, it was a payer-provider, and so they were concerned about reimbursements and supporting their reimbursement expenses. We've seen it used in a mutual fund company where they needed to have proper allocations in support of the fees that were attached to the mutual funds. So, many different uses that we're seeing this out there today that are beyond just a need for product or customer profitability. You may see yourself in one of these companies that I have listed here. If you're in one of these categories, a tool like this might be very valuable to you and, provide you more information than you have today to make some of these business decisions. With that, I'm going to turn it back over to Mark and see if we have any questions from the audience that we can answer.
Excellent. Randall and Cynthia, thanks so much for your insights today. Now we're going to open it up to some questions. So if you want to ask a question, please go to the chat box and make sure you flip your drop-down box to all panelists, and you can send a question over, and we will send those questions over. One of the questions that usually comes up, and Cynthia touched on this a little bit, but there's a lot of data that generally is required in an application like this. It may come from various places, and one of the things that we always get asked, and Cynthia, I'll throw this to you, if there's not a data warehouse in place or a centralized data store, how do clients deal with the data to make sure that they can get it into their models?
Yeah, we all know, if I'm going to use a lot of different drivers, square feet, head count, units, unit cost, et cetera, I have to get that information from somewhere. And generally it's available in some system within the company, but if I don't already have a data warehouse in place where it's easy for me to go get that, because this is an Oracle Hyperion product, they have various tools that we can use to go grab a lot of that data and import it into the cube, the Essbase cube that sits underneath the models fairly easily. So it's not a prohibitor, but I think it is one of the things that people need to have in mind when they undertake this kind of a project, is just knowing that's going to be a little bit of an extra work if I don't have a data warehouse. If I have a data warehouse, then that's great, and let's go use everything we can get our hands on, so to speak.
Great. Thanks, Cynthia. Then I'm going to throw this question over to Randall. I'm going to paraphrase this a little bit. It's a question, Randall, around how does Leggett & Platt tactically use this information during the transaction or bidding process? So how does that actually drive or justify during the process of putting the pricing or the bid together to make sure you're profitable during the bid process?
Yeah, I would see it working like this. First of all, we're going to come at it from two directions. First of all, that customer, we want to see, with the current cost to serve and the way we do business with them, what's the profitability of that customer? The second thing we would look at then, for the products that they want to buy, we'd look at what's the profitability of those product families. And then the third thing we've got to look at is, if with something we already provide and it's just the next phase in the business, how profitable are those products for that customer? So when Cynthia talked about how we're doing products and customers and in the intersection, that's what we would look at. Now, our tool is built to where we're looking at product families with the thousands and thousands of products that we have. We didn't really see the need to get down to the granularity of individual SKUs. But in the way we've designed the tool, designing the product families is pretty important. So we look at things like, what's the manufacturing processes? We look at, is this a make product or a buy product? And by understanding the costs that drive the business, then we try to make sure that each of those families is pretty homogeneous as far as the outputs that we're going to get. So, but that would be the way we would look at that. What's the profitability of the customer? What's the profitability of the products? Is it change if we look at the intersection of the products for that customer, and then devise a pricing strategy, and of course you're going to blend in, what's profitability for the business itself, what's going on in the external impacts, The other thing that we see developing is, and that first three steps there are going to be fairly canned, presentable. But we may also find that, if this is a major increase in the business, we anticipate maybe doing an ad hoc analysis to say, if it's going to be 25% more volume for the business, then we may do an ad hoc analysis that lets us say, okay, that's going to change a lot of the baseline historical numbers we've looked at. What would that look like? So the technologies there, the supporting is and we've tried to anticipate the answers and the questions we're gonna need to provide, so that the system's geared to react to that. So that's kind of how we would see that working. And I don't think there's really need to be, if we need the level of granularity, then we would go back to our standard cost systems and do some comparisons at the SKU level.
Excellent. Thanks, Randall. There's another question that is coming through a different mechanism here. Cynthia, I think this one might be for you. The versions of EPM that have HPCM incorporated into them, since this is part of the larger platform, at what point does HPCM really come into play in the versions from Oracle?
It would be after 11, I believe. The latest version of Oracle software that has HPCM in it, I know, is 11.1.2.2. So I believe you have to be on version 11 to have HPCM available.
Okay.
Is that the question?
I believe that's the question. Essentially, you're right. It's an 11. It's integrated as part of the platform. So I think to some of the things you were saying earlier, right, in terms of you can use the tools on top of it because it's built on top of Essbase. You can share data back and forth with other Essbase applications.
Right.
So, okay. So right now, I think that is the last question we have. So if there are no further questions, I definitely appreciate everyone's time today and taking time over your lunch hour, if you're in the Central Time Zone, to participate and ask questions. Also, if you have other questions you would like to ask, and for competitive reasons or just in this forum it's not conducive to ask your question, feel free to contact me at mark.sims@marketsphere.com, which you can see on the screen right there, and we will be more than happy to follow up with answers to your questions. And with that, I thank everyone and have a good rest of the day.